So shall we begin?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so in our previous class we were discussing about the various dispersions, the various dispersion mechanisms that happens inside an optical fiber, which would cause the optical signals to broaden in time domain. I think we have covered almost, in fact, most of the important concepts related to the communication medium in an optical communication system. For example, we have covered about optical fibers and optical waveguides. So from now on, we'll discuss about the various devices that are used for enabling an optical communication system. And the very first device what we are going to discuss is the laser diode. So we will. Okay, so here are the devices what we are going to discuss. So we'll discuss laser. We'll discuss about LED, and then we'll discuss about the photodiodes. And then we'll discuss about optical amplifiers. And then finally we'll discuss about, okay, so once we discuss about all these things, we'll discuss about how we can design an optical communication link. The design of an optical communication link. And we will also see how can you increase the channel capacity of an optical communication link. So increasing the channel capacity. Or in other words, we are going to increasing the bit rate. So we are going to increase the bit rate, number of bits that can be transmitted in a given time interval. So increasing the bit rate. So you also call it as multiplexing. So we'll discuss a multiplexing scheme which is called as WDM, which stands for wavelength divisional multiplexing. So this is a unique multiplexing system that is used in optical communication systems. So once we cover up all these things, and finally we'll study about optical modulators. Optical modulators. So that should be the last topic what we will be discussing. Okay, so if you consider an optical communication link, it's going to have a transmitter, and then at the receiver side you are going to have a receiver. There's a receiver, and between that you are going to have an optical fiber or an optical waveguide. So if it's a long haul communication system, then you definitely are going to have an optical fiber. So we studied about this. We studied about the transmission medium in detail, and we also studied about the various loss mechanisms, the various ways by which you can join an optical fiber. We also study about the various dispersion mechanisms that causes the pulses to broaden in time domain. So now to complete the entire communication link, it's not just the optical fiber. You also need to have some devices. For example, the signal what is being traveling inside an optical fiber is actually being launched by this optical transmitter, and this transmitter is nothing but an optical light source. So light source. So if you consider analogous to an electrical communication system, the normal communication system, what you might have studied. So you need to have a transmitter. So you need to have some oscillator. You must be having an electronic oscillator, which will actually give you which will actually give you the carrier signal. So analogous to that, what you have in an optical communication system is what is called as a light source. And there are two kinds of light sources that are commonly used in optical communication systems. For example, they are the laser and LED. So the two light sources are laser and LED, light emitting diode. So you launch these signals inside an optical fiber, it travels through the fiber, and then on the way, you might lose some signal, or so when you lose the signal, obviously you're going to have some attenuation, so you're going to lose the signal. So periodically you need to amplify that, you need to strengthen the signal so that the receiver, when it receives the signal, it can properly determine whether it has received a 1 or a 0. So in between that, you need to have some kind of amplifiers. So you need to have an amplifier. So this is an amplifier which would amplify the signal, and at the receiver side, obviously if you at the receiver side, the signals will have to be converted back to the electrical domain, for which you need to have a receiver which is actually made of a photodiode. So here you are going to have a photodiode. You're going to have a photodiode. So you have a light source, and if you want to modulate the signal, then you must be having a modulator as well. So here, just after the transmitter or just after the light source, you'll also have another device. So let's say you call this as modulator. You have a modulator. So to complete the to have a big picture of an optical communication system, we need to understand how all these devices work and how all these devices can be put together so that you get a satisfactory optical communication system. And that is what we do in the design of optical communication link. So every time you have a device, the device has a particular function, but that device is also going to add up to some loss. It's also going to increase the loss. So that the loss that is being the loss that incurs because of a component being inserted in a system is what is called as the insertion loss. Insertion loss. For example, if you have an amplifier, the amplifier would of course amplify the signal, but the amplifier will also cause some loss. So the loss that occurs because of inserting a device in a communication link is what is called as an insertion loss. So you will have to consider, when you are designing an optical communication link, you will have to consider for all these losses, and you will have to see that by the time the signal reaches the receiver, reaches the photodiode, it has sufficient power so that it can properly take a decision. So that entire exercise is being described in what is called as the design of an optical communication link, which we will see after we discuss all these devices. And suppose, let's say that there are a lot of users, it's not just one receiver, there are thousands of users that are trying to access the data. So probably just one fiber will not be enough, or probably just one transmitter is not enough. So then you will have to use multiple transmitters. Probably one fiber is okay, but then you will have to use multiple transmitters. So transmitter 2, transmitter 1, and so on. You are going to have a series of transmitters. So these transmitters are nothing but laser diodes that operate at different wavelengths. For example, one would be emitting at 1550 nanometer. The other one would be emitting at slightly different wavelength, let's say 1551 nanometer, and so on. Now all these signals, all these photons will have to be combined and then will have to be launched inside an optical fiber. So you have to combine all these wavelengths, you'll have to gather all these wavelengths and then launch them simultaneously inside an optical fiber. The motivation for doing this is that you can increase the bit rate. So that is what is called as multiplexing or wavelength division multiplexing. Because you're multiplexing different wavelengths, you call it as wavelength division multiplexing. Okay, so for the remainder of our lectures, we are going to discuss about all these things. Okay, so let's start with lasers and LEDs. So some of the slides are going to be common with what we have discussed in our third semester when we covered semiconductor devices. So I'm going to skip some of the initial slides on laser diodes, but just to have a recap, a laser is actually it's an expansion of light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. So laser is a coherent source of monochromatic radiation whose range could be anywhere from 200 nanometer all the way up to 20 micrometer. So it's an oscillator. It's not really an amplifier, but in fact what it really does is it's an oscillator. You might have studied about electronic oscillators, and oscillators are constructed by having an amplifier with a positive feedback. You have the amplifier provides the gain and the feedback. So you have a feedback path which would ensure that some part of the output signal is fed back to the input. So you satisfy a particular condition, and so that you get the output from the you get a particular output from the oscillator. So the main components of a laser is you need to have a gain medium, you need to have a feedback, and in the case of a laser you call it as an optical feedback or an optical resonator. The word resonator is used because the resonator can support only discrete frequencies. And then obviously you need to have a pump, or you need to have a power supply. So those are the components, those are the basic components of a laser. And there are different classes of lasers. So here is a schematic of a laser. So you have two mirrors. So you have one mirror which is highly reflective, and you have a partially reflecting mirror. So these two mirrors are kept in parallel. And here you have a gain medium. So this red region, what you see here, so this is the gain medium. This is the gain medium. And you have some external pumping source which would generate additional photons, which would pump this gain medium. So this mirror is going to be 100% reflective. This mirror is going to be partially reflective, or it's something like 99.9% reflective. So this means that if 100 photons are falling on this mirror, because it has 100% reflectivity, all the photons are going to be reflected back. Now this mirror is going to have a reflectivity of 99.9%. So let's say you have 1000 photons that are falling on this mirror. Then out of 1000 photons, 999 photons will be sent back in this direction, but one photon would be going out of this laser cavity. And that photon is what you get as the laser beam. Okay, so before we go into the explanation of laser, so we need to understand the difference between absorption, spontaneous emission, and stimulated emission, which is the central. So the stimulated emission is the fundamental principle behind the operation of a laser. So you know what absorption is. If you have two energy levels, and if you have an incoming photon whose energy is exactly the difference between E2 and E1, this photon will take an electron from this level and will put that electron into this level. It will take from E1 and put it into E2. Now, once the electron sits at E2, you call this electron as an excited electron, and the electron over there is the ground state electron. So this electron, after a certain time interval called as the lifetime, this electron would automatically come back to the original level. And in that process, the excess energy or the difference of energy is released as a photon. So if the material in which this process is happening is a direct band gap material, you are going to get this as a photon. If not, you are going to get this as a phonon. So please go back, please go through the slides on semiconductor devices, what we discussed in our third semester. Okay. Now, so this is what is called as spontaneous emission, because the electron falls back and a photon is emitted spontaneously. Whereas what we are interested is in a stimulated emission. So stimulated emission means you have an electron that is excited, you have an incoming photon whose energy is exactly equal to the energy separation between E2 and E1. So this photon, this wavy arrow is a photon. So that's how usually photons are pictorially represented. So this photon would trigger this electron to come back. This photon would interact with this electron and cause this electron to come back. And in the process, it's going to emit two photons. The difference between this emission and this emission is that the emitted photon and the incoming photon has the same frequency, the same phase, and the same direction. In fact, also the same polarization. So you call it as, so therefore you call it as a coherent beam of photons. So you call it as so that's the difference between a stimulated emission and a spontaneous emission. So this is spontaneous, this is stimulated. Stimulated because this photon is stimulating this electron to come down and causing two photons to be emitted. So we use this in lasers. Okay. Now, if this has to happen, there are certain other conditions that has to be obeyed. So one is that the incoming photon energy should be equal to the energy separation between E2 and E1. The other is this incoming, you should not have an electron in this level, because if you have an electron in this level, then this photon will cause this electron to go up and will not result in this electron to come down, will not stimulate this electron to come down and then release an additional photon. So you need to have a situation where in the excited state, you are having more number of carriers than the carriers in this level. That means the carriers in level E2 should be much greater than the carriers in level E1. You call this condition as the population inversion. So this population inversion is extremely important for lasers to work. And population inversion does not happen naturally. You need to create that population inversion, and this is for which you use a pump. So population inversion is created by pumping, and there are different ways by which you can pump electrons from this level to that level. It could be optical pumping, or it could be even electrical pumping. Electrical pumping means you apply a voltage. That's the easiest way by which you can create population inversion. And that is what we do in the case of laser diodes. Optical pumping can also be used where you have an incoming, you have photons which causes this electron to go to this level. So in that case, if a photon causes this electron to go to the excited state, you call it as optical pumping. So optical pumping versus electrical pumping. So in a laser diode, we generally, we always exploit electrical pumping. That's because that's very easy. You can easily apply voltage. Okay. Any questions so far?
Sir, in that laser, how do we construct a fully reflective mirror in practical situation? Like
you can take a mirror and then make it highly, you can polish it, and then you can make the reflectivity to be 100%.
Yes, sir. But like even in case of TIR, we have like we do not get 100% reflectivity. So like will the polishing?
TIR is not it's not a perfect mirror.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. So okay. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Sir?
Okay. Yeah, go on.
Sir, this photon used to excite de-excite the other electron. Is it an electrical source or is it an optical source produced photon, or it could be both?
Which one?
So in the third stimulated emission, the one used to de-excite the electron, is it produced by the photon produced by optical source or by electrical source or by both?
So you are asking me which is the photon that causes this electron to come down?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So how does an electrical oscillator work? So what is the cause? What is the origin of that? What is the origin of oscillations in an electronic oscillator?
Electrons, sir.
It's not electrons, in fact.
It's noise.
The state change.
Yeah, so you always have a noise. So in an electronic oscillator, you have an amplifier, and then you have a feedback, right? And then you take the output from you take the output from here. But here you have a you have a feedback mechanism, and then you have a resonance circuit here. So the amplifier will amplify. This amplifier is going to have a broad bandwidth. That means it can amplify everything. But this feedback circuit or the resonance circuit will ensure that only one particular frequency is being sent back to this amplifier. So you always the beginning of oscillation in an oscillator is you start with a noise. So likewise, what is the noise in a laser?
So any random photon.
Random emission, thermal emissions.
Okay, random emission. Okay, so which is random emission?
Spontaneous.
Yeah, so it's the spontaneous emission. So spontaneous emission means you have a photon. Okay, that photon has a the photon has a energy separation between E2 and E1, but you call it as spontaneous because you don't have really any control on that. So there are lots of spontaneously emitted photons, but it so happens that probably one of the photon has exactly the same direction as this photon. It has the same energy separation as E2 minus E1. It has the same frequency, it has the same phase, it has the same polarization, everything. So there is one random photon which satisfies all these conditions, and that is the one which actually triggers this entire stimulated emission process. So even in electronic circuits, even though we say that noise is something which is bad, of course noise is bad, but without noise you cannot have an oscillator. So likewise, even in lasers, we want everything to be spontaneous, to be stimulated emission, but stimulated emission cannot happen without spontaneous emission. Just like you say that friction is bad, but without friction, you cannot stop a moving car. Just like that.
Sir,
yeah.
When we take things to very cold temperatures, the noise will decrease. Then Then I read that there will be discrete levels of output for an oscillator. Why is that so?
If you okay, that we will discuss. Okay, that requires a very long discussion. So just go and we studied about energy bands, and we studied about density of states and energy bands in our third semester, right?
Yes.
So just go through that, then you will be able to answer that question.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so we are always interested in stimulated emission, and we want this condition to be satisfied. That means you must be having population inversion, where the electrons, the number of electrons in the upper state or the excited state is way larger than the number of electrons in the lower energy level. You call it as the population inversion. Okay, so we will now, now there are different materials, there are different gain materials or gain mediums by which you can create a laser. For example, you can have a gas laser. For example, one example is helium neon laser. The gain medium is provided by helium and neon. For example, in your op-amps or your operational amplifier, the amplifier is the op-amp. So that's a solid state amplifier. It's an electronic amplifier, but that's a solid state amplifier. So analogous to that, in the case of optical electronics, so the gain medium can be made out of gas. It could be made out of solid as well. So such lasers are called as solid state lasers. Lasers whose gain medium is made out of solid are called as solid state lasers. And among solids, there are different solids that can be used for creating a laser. But what we are interested for optical communication system is the semiconductor laser. That means the gain material is made out of semiconductors. And what kind of semiconductors do we have to use? We'll have to use a direct bandgap semiconductor, where the minimum of the conduction band and the maximum of the valence band, they have the same K value, so that an electron in the conduction band can directly go down and recombine with a hole in the valence band and can emit a photon. So we are going to discuss about, so all the semiconductors or all the semiconductor lasers are made out of direct bandgap material. Direct bandgap. So direct bandgap. Okay, now put in simple words, the laser should be having a amplifying medium or a gain medium, and then you should be having a feedback mechanism. So these two mirrors, these two parallel mirrors, it acts as the feedback mechanism. So the gain medium is going to amplify, it can amplify, it cannot amplify everything. It has certain bandwidth. So the gain spectrum or the relative amplification, if I plot the relative amplification as a function of frequency or wavelength, the gain profile looks something like a Gaussian function in the case of these amplifying mediums. So it's like a Gaussian medium, almost very similar to what you have in the case of in the case of an electronic amplifier as well. All right. So any frequencies which falls between these two values. So let's say, let me call this as f1 or lambda 1, and this one is lambda 2. So any frequency which falls between this lambda 1 and lambda 2 can be amplified by this amplifying medium, but the gain or of this amplifying medium is actually a function of lambda. So the material is not going to amplify all the wavelengths equally. You will see that there is a particular wavelength at which the gain is maximum. So the peak gain happens at a certain wavelength. So let me call it as lambda peak. There is a particular wavelength at which the peak gain happens or the maximum gain happens. All right. So this is the response of this gain medium. Now, what about the resonance circuit? So these two, let's say these two mirrors are separated by a certain distance called as L. So you have a particular distance between them called as L, the spacing between these two parallel mirrors, and this is a resonance circuit. So what is the meaning of resonance circuit? So if you have a string which is placed at 2 points, let's say you have a guitar string, and if I just pluck this guitar string, you know that you can have standing waves, right? So you can have one like this, you can have another one like that, you can see a third harmonic like that. So this means this string can support multiple wavelengths, or it can support multiple frequencies. Just like that, this what do I say? This cavity, or this resonant cavity, it's called as resonant cavity. So this resonant cavity can support multiple discrete wavelengths or multiple discrete frequencies. So a laser is nothing but a combination or a convolution of, it's a combination of both the gain medium and the resonant cavity. Resonant cavity. So a resonant cavity can support infinite, a resonant cavity can support infinite frequencies. So the end result or the net the frequencies that can be supported by this gain medium is actually a convolution between, the response of this cavity and the response of the gain medium. So for the gain medium, you have a Gaussian curve like this, and for the cavity, you have these discrete wavelengths. So if I convolute both of them, these lines, so the output would be only from these from these frequencies. Would only from these frequencies. Now, if you look at the individual output of this resonator, you would see that there is a particular spacing between each of these frequency components. So that separation is actually decided by the length of this cavity. It's actually decided by the length of this cavity. So if I have a long cavity, that means the spacing between the mirror is large, then it turns out that these two frequency components, they become closer and closer. That means it would be difficult for you to distinguish between this and that. Just like if you know how to play a guitar, so if you have a very long string, and then if you are plucking that, then the separation of the tones that occur from the string, or the neighboring tones that occurs from the string, the difference between them is going to be subtle if the length is large. So likewise, if you have a long cavity, then these frequency components are going to become closer and closer. So that means if I have, let's say that I have a long cavity and then I have gain medium. So it's going to, so my laser emission is going to be like this. So I'm going to have, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to have 8 outputs or 8 wavelength components from this laser diode. From this laser diode. So what I can do is I can actually select. So in this case, I have, let's say I'm having there's an overlap between the gain medium and the individual cavity modes. So in this case, I'm going to get 5 discrete outputs from the laser. If I change the position, or if I can change how these discrete frequencies or discrete wavelengths are going to intersect this gain curve, then I can make it, instead of 5, I can make it only 4. So here you see that there is actually 5 there are 5 discrete wavelength components, but here I am having only 1. Sorry, I am having only 4. So of these multiple wavelengths, or out of these multiple frequency components that are coming out from the laser, we would also always prefer to work with the one which has the largest amplitude, because that's the one which is going to have the largest gain, the largest number of photons. So in this case, we would prefer to work with this one because this has the largest amplitude. Okay, I'm going to skip all this, but we are going to discuss about, we are going to use only semiconductor lasers. Now, a semiconductor laser is nothing but a semiconductor laser diode. So the heart of a semiconductor laser is actually a PN diode. And you know how a PN diode is made? You join a p-type semiconductor with an n-type semiconductor, you form a depletion region, and you know that the width of the depletion region is decided by the doping densities. Now, the difference between the construction of a normal PN diode and a semiconductor PN diode is the fact that the semiconductor PN diodes are usually degeneratively doped. That means you are going to have heavy doping on both p sides and n sides. So because of which, the Fermi energy level is going to lie somewhere inside the valence band or above the conduction band. So below the valence band or above the conduction band. So these are holes. These are holes, and these are electrons. So this is the energy band diagram of a semiconductor laser at equilibrium when no voltage is applied. Now, once you apply a forward bias, you know that the N side, the band would move up, and the width of the depletion region is going to decrease. So you would see that in the depletion region, which is also called as the active region. So in this narrow region, you will see that there is a region called as the active region, where in some region you will see that there are more number of electrons compared to here you are having more number of electrons compared to here. So which means in this region you are going to have, in the depletion region, you are going to have population inversion. Population inversion, and obviously these materials are made out of direct band gap material. So which means that the electron would recombine with the hole, and in the process, because it's a direct band gap material, it creates a photon. So let's say that multiple electrons are joining with multiple holes. to create multiple photons. So this is what happens inside a PN junction diode, but then you'll have to make it a laser. To make it a laser, what you do is you cleave both the end faces of the laser diode. You polish it. So the cleaved surface of the two sides of the two cleaved sides of the laser diode would act as a mirror. So one would be let's say highly reflecting, the other one would be partially reflecting, so that from the sides where you have a partially reflecting mirror, you are going to get more number of photons. So earlier semiconductor laser diodes were made out of gallium arsenide, and they were all made out of homojunctions. Whereas modern day laser diodes are made out of heterojunction, heterojunctions, and we have studied the reason why we use heterojunctions in our third semester. So please refer to those slides. All right. Now for a optical communication system, as I said, we are very much interested in properly deciding the wavelength at which the laser diode operates. So you want to clearly control the wavelength at which the light emission happens from a laser diode. The reason is because we have seen that optical fibers, they have the least dispersion at a particular wavelength, the least attenuation at some other wavelength. So it's always advantageous if you can precisely adjust or control the wavelength at which a laser diode can operate. So one way by which you can adjust the light, you can adjust the wavelength of operation of a laser diode is by using what is called as a quantum well laser. You know what a quantum well is? So you take a narrow bandgap semiconductor material and sandwich it between two wider bandgap materials. So this is gallium arsenide, and these two are aluminum gallium arsenide. So aluminum gallium arsenide has a wider band gap, and gallium arsenide has a narrow band gap. And the width of the gallium arsenide layer is typically of the order of the de Broglie wavelength. So something like less than 15 nanometer. That's the width of this gallium arsenide layer. And this is the active layer. So once you have layers which are so thin, then the electrons and holes that are there inside this layer will not be able to take continuous values of energies. Rather, the energy of the electrons and holes would be discretized. So you are going to have discrete energy levels for these electrons and holes. So this is the conduction band, this is the valence band. So this E1, what you see here, this line, what you see here, this is the excited state, this is the excited state, and this is the ground state. That means electrons are going to be here, the holes are going to be in this level. The ground state of the electron is going to be here, the ground state of the hole is going to be here. The first excited state of the electron is going to be here, the first excited state for the hole is going to be there. And the energy E1 or the energy E2, this E1 is actually decided by the width of the potential well. That means this E1 can be adjusted by the width of the potential well D and also the height of the potential well. So transitions are going to happen between E1 and, so I'll call this level as E1 prime. So transitions are going to happen between E1 and E1 prime. This level. That means E1 minus E1 prime would be the energy of photon that would be emitted from this quantum well structure. And you can adjust E1 and E1 prime. How do you adjust E1 and E1 prime? Simply by adjusting D. That means at the time of fabrication, you can decide what should be the width of this potential well, or what should be the width of this quantum well, and that width would actually decide what would be the emission wavelength coming out from this laser. So nowadays, almost all semiconductor lasers are based on quantum well structures. So these kind of lasers are very important, and you call it as the quantum well laser. So the advantage is you can precisely adjust E1 and E1 prime. In fact, by changing the width, by changing D, and thereby the light, the wavelength of the photon that is being emitted from this structure can also be tuned. So that's a big advantage of a quantum well laser. Okay, I'll stop here. We'll continue in the next class. So tomorrow, tomorrow's class will be taken by Professor Manoj, and probably he'll be starting with satellite communication. Okay, so I'll stop here. We'll see in the next class. So any questions so far?
No, sir.
Okay, so have you all seen the, yeah, go on.
Sir, in this quantum well laser, like h nu can be either E1 minus E1 prime or E2 minus E2 prime, like that, sir.
Which one?
Sir, the energy of the emitted photon, it can be either E1 minus E1 prime or E2 minus E2 prime or E3 minus E3 prime, like that, sir.
Yeah, so it would be usually E1 minus E1 prime or E2 minus E2 prime and so on. But most of the transitions usually happen between E1 and E1 prime. Most of the transitions.
Okay, sir.
Okay, if no further questions, I'll stop here. And by the way, all of you, have you all seen the homework?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine.
Sir?
Okay, then thank you all.
Hello, sir. Can you tell
Yeah.
us the syllabus for the quiz one?
Syllabus for?
Quiz 2, sir. Syllabus for quiz 2.
So whatever I teach until the previous day of quiz 2.
Okay, sir.
Sir, Vani ma'am's question will be there.
What is that?
If Vani ma'am has taught us 4 lectures, will that be there?
Yeah, that will be there.
Okay, sir.